Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Now let's give a warm welcome to our main speaker, Milton.
I'm Milton. I'm an alcoholic. I like to throw dates out for people who like to figure things out. I was born here in Southern California in 1935. I had my first blackout drunk in Tijuana, Mexico in 1950. Called Alcoholics Anonymous for direction to a meeting in 1957. I went to that meeting in 1966. And I got sober in 1973. So, in fact, one of the first bigger meeting I ever went to was the Malibu meeting, and it was held in the sheriff's station, the old courthouse, the red brick building on Highway 1. Charlie Dick was the speaker. I told him years later that I heard you speak, Charlie, and I went out and drank for 7 more years. But I sure laughed hard that night, I'll tell you. But I'm a California kid. I was born and raised here in Southern California, and my mom was from Montana, but she was kind of a California party girl. She was way ahead of her time. She was married 4 times by the time I was 11. So I was one of those kids that, you know, my mom would say, we're going to call Walter, or we're going to call Kelly Daddy. And I said, well, what happened to Walter? He was just here 15 minutes ago, you know. and then in between husbands, there was a few Uncle Charlies. And my mom was way ahead of her time, you know. But she was an alcoholic. And I come to find later on she couldn't help the things that she did. I mean, she would forget where she lived, and it was all right as long as there was food in the refrigerator. But when the food started going down, I'd get a little antsy, you know. And so I learned how to shoplift. You know, package of lunch meat fit right in my back pocket. You know, ate a lot of lunch meat because I had nobody to raise me. I raised myself, you know. So as a young man, I was very, very industrious. I started a business. In those days, they called it Midnight Auto Supply, and my specialty was 49 Ford radios. You know, they were a good radio, like $112, and that was in the 49. That was a lot of money. And I could take that radio out in 5 minutes, and I could sell it to Blackie, the junkyard dealer, for $10. And you know, he was getting a deal, and I thought I was getting a deal. And one night I was taking one of those radios out, and it was about 10 minutes to 2, and this gal decided she would go to the market. What the hell is she going to the market at 10 minutes to 2 for, you know? And she jumped in the car, and the radio came out in my hands, and I took off down the street, and she's yelling, "Stop thief!" And I want you to know how I was in those days. I had what they call, it was a Hollywood haircut, a flat top with long sideburns and long sides and a duck's ass and about 4 pounds of grease. I wore a pair of Levi's that you didn't have to fold them up, they'd stand in the corner. Had a black motorcycle jacket on with beer can openers hanging from all the chains. Engineer boots with solid steel taps on the bottom of the great running shoes, you know. And I'm sparking down the street, you know, and I go by, to show you that I never had a goddamn break, you know, I ran by a retired cop and his German Shepherd, you know. And the cop had me around the neck in a hammerlock, and his dog had me by the pant leg, and he drug me back to this lady, and he said, you know, he said, I'm a retired policeman. If I get tied up in this, I'll be filling paperwork out for the rest of my life. He says, I know who he is, I know where he lives. He says, he's given me his address and everything, and he says, he'll do whatever you say. So I put the radio back in and got it working. And now since that time, I've had 5 car radios stolen. You know. What goes around comes around. But when they steal my radio, they make a hole in the dashboard about that big, cost $2,400 worth of damage to put a $200 radio back. I mean, there's just no workmanship anymore. You know what I mean? People have totally lost respect for the work ethic. You know. But yeah, I got this thing back in, and she said, I don't know what to do with you. She said, I should call the police. And I said, no, and I started crying and I started sniveling, and I said, my mother's home and she's in a wheelchair, and there's no food in the house, and we're starving, and I was just trying to get some money to buy some groceries. And she started crying, and she let me go. And I walking home, I was thinking, boy, Barnum's right. There's a sucker born every minute. That was my attitude. You know, that was my attitude. You know, she's just a sucker. You know, and when her husband and son got home from Lockheed off the night shift, my story lost something in translation. So when I showed up at school the next day, there was two big juvenile detectives waiting for me, and I didn't get off so easily. But Fred Flack, the director of the Boys Club of Hollywood, said to deal with the police department that any of his boys get arrested, he wanted to see him. Well, I was 16 and a half years old. Geez, I'm drying up. I was 16 and a half years old, and he put me in barber school to keep me out the streets, because I was washing out of school. I was doing the same grades over and over again. I was absent more than I was present. I was never showing up. So I started barber school down 3rd and Main Street. I was 16 and a half years old, and it was during the end of the Korean War, and a lot of these guys were getting discharged. All the guys were getting Section 8s, which is a discharge for mental incapacity, were becoming barbers also. Thank you, Martin. And they took me downtown and got me some phony ID cards, and I started drinking in the bars on 3rd and Main at I've got a neurological problem besides alcoholism. But they got me a phony ID card, and I started drinking in the bars downtown. Now, I'd seen what alcohol did for people. I saw what it did for my family. I had an uncle die of alcoholism. I had a mother that was a terrible alcoholic. I had forefathers. You're not supposed to call anybody else an alcoholic, but if they swim like ducks and they quack like ducks, they're probably ducks. And my mother was married to 4 ducks, and so I knew what alcoholism was all about. And I started drinking pretty heavy and getting in a lot of trouble at 16 and a half. And my grandmother took me aside one day and she says, honey, she says, nobody in your family can drink on either side of the family. And I says, yes, but Grandma, you don't understand. My case is going to be different. I'm going to be able to handle it. And I was already having problems with it at 16 and a half years old. And when I heard a doctor talk on a tape a while back, and he says, alcoholics are people that are just born miserable, and somebody gives them a drink somewhere along the way and they get well, you know. And that's what I was. I was just miserable and scared all my life. And when I started drinking, it made life worthwhile. It just seemed to do something for me that nothing had done for me before. And so when people would tell me from the very beginning that alcohol was a problem, in my mind, alcohol was all I had going for me. Alcohol was the only thing that made life worthwhile. Alcohol was the only thing that made life tenable. So to tell me that I shouldn't drink was unthinkable. You know, it was just like, fine, keep your opinion to yourself. You know, I can handle it. I'm doing all right. I'm fine. And that was my attitude when I was 16 and a half years old, and it was my attitude until I was 38 years old. Because I would just totally deny that alcohol was the problem. And I went through barber school, and I got out of barber school, and I figured, no, this ain't it. I cut hair for about 15 minutes, and I figured, no, I don't like it. And I was walking down the street one time, and I saw this sign that says, the Marines make men. I thought, well, I'll join the United States Marine Corps and become a man. Because I was a big kid, I was 6'2", you know, and I was at a man's body, but, a little boy inside. And I was afraid to go down to the Marine Corps by myself, so I took a friend, and he signed up, and I signed up. And it was during the end of the Korean War, so they weren't taking a whole lot of people. So he got taken, and he went to basic training, and was discharged, was all through basic training, and came back on leave, and I hadn't been called up yet. And I saw him at a party, and this was a real gregarious guy, you know, just real outgoing. And he was sitting in this corner all stoop-shouldered with this grim look on his face. And I went up to him and I started talking to him, and they slapped all the personality right out of him, you know. And he got in my face and he says, "Milton, whatever you do, don't join the goddamn Marines." You know? I remember, it was like yesterday, all the blood drained out of my face, and I rushed down real quick to the recruiter the next day, and I talked to this Air Force recruiter, and I did a little sniveling, and he said, "Have they sworn you in?" I said, "No." He said, "I'll send them a letter, and you can go in the Air Force." And he said, "You got 6 months to get your stuff in order. You can take the whole summer off." And that was on a Friday. Monday, I was staying in my underwear in the Motor Day building. That's the first time I realized the government lies to you. And it was a slip of the lip, and I was off for 4 years in the United States Air Force. Now, I can do a whole litany on my Air Force career, but I'll just give you the highlights. I was promoted 7 times, and I got out with 1 stripe. I was never court-martialed, but I didn't get a good conduct medal, and I was Article 15 about 12 times. I got so many Article 15s, and I painted so many rocks white and mowed so many lawns that they thought I was the base gardener. I tore a wingtip off an airplane one night when I was drunk. I ran a weapons carrier through the CO's office one night when I was drunk, knocked all his plaques and trophies on the floor. Wrecked the weapons carrier one night full of GIs on the way to the midnight chow, driving it drunk. In the Air Force, I was either in trouble or just getting out of trouble, or I was waiting for them to find out what I'd done, you know. I was a little missile fixed, the little guy in the little avenue with the little black cloud and the thunder and lightning, you know. Just always in trouble, and it was because of my drinking. You know, the CO, the NCO, the adjutant, the first sergeant, all of them would tell me, if you just wouldn't drink so much, you know. And I would, in my head, I'd say, yeah, right, right, I'll drink less, you know, and it never dawned on me. I got out of the service when I was 21. I came back to the States. Oh, another thing that just came to me a while back was while I was over in Scotland, I wrecked a motorcycle, took it off the side of a mountain at 100 miles an hour drunk, lived to tell about it. Passed out in a parking lot of a bar in Scotland in the wintertime and woke up covered with snow. Now, bars close in the wintertime in Scotland at 9:30 in the wintertime. I woke up at 5 in the morning. Now, the papers are full of the GI papers are full of GIs that have passed out in the snow and lost their feet and their hands and their lives. I don't know why I didn't get frostbite or anything else, but it may have been the 4 gallons of alcohol I had in me. I don't know. But I was just, my life was just a shambles, and I could hardly wait to get out of the service. And I came back to the States, and I'm 21, and I'm a full-blown alcoholic, and it's not any better. You know, I get in all kinds of trouble. I'm at a stop sign, and this pretty girl waves at me one night about 2:30 in the morning after the bars had closed, and I thought she fell in love with me or something, and I was chasing her, and she said later on it was a mistaken identity, but she made a U-turn on a street, and I was right behind her, and she backed into my car and smashed it and then took off. So now I want to get her to get my car fixed. And we're high-speed chasing all through Hollywood, and I turned onto Kingsley and Melrose, and she's gone. And I figured, God, that woman can drive. And coming back, there was a bunch of squad cars and lights, blinking lights, something like that. She had missed the corner, and she had taken a 49 Ford front end and taken it all the way to the back of the barber. Went to a barber shop, a cleaners, and a dress shop. And I looked way back, I could see the blinking lights way back in the dress shop. And being the rocket scientist I was, I stopped because she had hurt my car, you know. And I was being sued for $150,000, and life just wasn't getting any better, you know. It just, I mean, now I'm out of the service, and I'm still getting in trouble all the time. But it's not my drinking, you know. It's just I'm having a lot of bad breaks, you know. It just and them, you know, them would just shape up. Everything would be much better. And I came up with another great idea for myself. I was good at coming up with, you know, I was self-made man. I had gone with this gal when I was before I went in the service, and then she sent me a Dear John in the letter in the service, and she married some swabby and had a couple of kids, and she'd gotten divorced, and one of the kids had died of her hideous disease, and she was living in Santa Rosa, and I was living down here in Los Angeles, and we had a long-range romance, you know, one that's between your ears, and great way to have a romance, you know, because I'd go fly up there, and we'd play, and she'd fly down here, and we'd play, and And she flew down here and stayed, and we got married. And we went to Las Vegas. And halfway to Las Vegas, we stopped to get something to eat. And I'm looking at her and I figuring, I shouldn't be doing this. I really shouldn't be getting married. This is really not the answer. This is really not the answer. And I had already asked her, and I'd already borrowed my roommate's car to drive, and my dad had given me $100 worth of quarters. And so a slip of the lip, and we got married. She passed out on the bed, and I went out and gambled. And that was I can explain that marriage real quick. We'd go to her dad's house for a party, and I'd say, Arliss, now for Christ's sake, let's pretend like we like each other, When we go to bed at night, I'd be so far away from her that I had to put one hand on the floor to keep from falling out of bed. And she was probably on the other side of the bed with her hand on the floor, And she was a full-blown alcoholic, and I was a full-blown alcoholic, and I don't know why we were staying together. God only knows. But I was telling myself, my life was really bitching before I got married, And that's a dynamic memory, There always the good old days, There really aren't any good old days. It just seems that way. But I thought if I get this woman, and when we'd had 2 children just like that, I had an 8-month-old and a 19-month-old, and they were both in diapers. And I was saving my money to make my great escape, and she had a sponsor. She had some guy that had she thought he had a lot of money. It turned out his wife had all the money. And she ran off with him and left me with the 2 kids. Took all $36 in the checking account in the last car, in the only car. Left me with these 2 kids in diapers and left me with her son. And I had a motor scooter, and I lived out in Newbury Park. And I worked down in the old part of Thousand Oaks, which was about 8 miles away. And my mornings would consist of I'd get up in the morning, hungover, fix the kids something to eat, feed the baby too hot of food usually, burn his mouth, pack a diaper bag, put it over my shoulder, put the baby on my lap. The little girl would get on and hang on behind me, and I'd get on the motor scooter and I'd putt over to the babysitter's house. We'd get in sight of the babysitter's house, and the kids would start to scream. And God knows what that babysitter was doing. All these tapes you see on television now, And she's probably putting them in a cage and giving them milk bones. I don't know. I get up on Highway 101, and I couldn't drive on the pavement because this motor scooter wouldn't go fast enough. I'd get flattened by the trucks. So I drive the shoulder all the way down to the old part of Thousand Oaks. My life is really shaping up now, and but it's not my drinking. It's not my drinking. That's not really a problem. And something was to start happening that started really getting my attention. I would get the kids all dressed in their night clothes and bathed and in their cribs. And there was a bar about 5 blocks away called the Tally-Ho. And I'd get on my, by this time I had a car. I had a 47 DeSoto that the neighbor gave me for $5. And then he helped me put brakes on it. It was a typical drunk's car. It had no first or reverse. It had cardboard windows, GI blankets for seat covers. But it ran, and I'd jump in that old DeSoto and I'd go up to the Tally-Ho, and
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
And I'd have a couple of beers, and I'd run back and check on the kids. And I'd go up and have a few beers, play some pool, and check on the kids. Then the guy would pour me a couple shots. Somebody would buy me a couple straight shooters, and I'd drink them. Then I'd have to buy them a couple straight shooters. And I'd look at my watch, and it'd be midnight, and I figured, well, the kids will be all right for another couple hours. And I'd wake up the next morning, and it's one of those mornings that alcoholics just love. The birds are chirping, and the sun is shining, And your hair's asleep, and your teeth itch, and every time your heart beats, your head just goes into this excruciating pain, and all of a sudden I realize I'm in the back seat of the car. I'm not at home, and it's like 10 o'clock. And I'd say this prayer, please, God, please let that home and those kids be all right. And I promise you from the bottom of my heart, I will never, ever do this again. And I did that far too many times. And that's when I started doing Alcoholics Anonymous in 1966. And I was told by well-meaning old-timers that, you got to come here for yourself. I said, you come here for yourself, I'm here for my kids. And when I first got sober in 66, something really wonderful happened, I thought. Turned out not to be so wonderful. I got cleaned up really fast. Within 6 months, I had a new job. I was no longer a barber. I had a much better job in a construction outfit. I had gotten all the creditors off my back. I was having them taking bonds out of my salary. I had bought a new car. I mean, not a brand new car, but a new car to me. It was only about 6 years old. And the kids were all shaped up, and the house was looking good. And I was at a meeting, and a nice little old lady didn't mean anything by it. And she says, you know, Milton, you don't look like an alcoholic. And I was in combing my hair in the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror, and I said, you're goddamn, I don't look like an alcoholic, because I'm not. You know? And I remember going out with my girlfriend one night, and we went to a dinner house, and we were having dinner. She says, what, can't you have a little wine with your dinner? I said, yeah, I can have a little wine with my dinner. We had a couple of splits and drank that, went into the next room to the lounge show, had a couple of scotch and waters, tall glass, no ice, a lot of water. Got home, took her home, didn't make any obscene passes at her. Took the babysitter home. I was getting a babysitter now. And I was sitting on the end of my bed. I can remember it like it was yesterday, you know, taking my clothes off, hang them all, putting on hangers and hanging them in the closet. I think, what are they talking about? The first drink gets you drunk. Those people at Alcoholics Anonymous don't know their ass from a hole in the ground, you know. Either that or I'm not an alcoholic. Now, I don't know whether it was 15 minutes or 2 weeks or 2 months, but somewhere along the way I'd wake up in front of the television set. My favorite show would be playing the Indian Head, you know. Remember the music, you Indian Head watchers, you know? It went like this. It went, boo! You'd have this horrible, horrible headache, you know, and that would just push you right down in the middle of the skull. And I'd turn the TV off, and you try and set the alarm clock so it doesn't go off when you pull the plunger, because you only got 18 minutes to sleep. And an empty gallon of Red Mountain on the floor, you know, and the burn holes all around my chair, and the car's gone, and there's a notice on the garage door to quit the property, and I'm back on the marshal told me one time, he says, I just put rubber bands on these summonses and throw them on your front porch, like, you know, my paper route. He says, I'm around here 2 or 3 times a week, you know. I was being sued by everybody, and my life was back in the shitter one more time, and I couldn't figure it out, you know. I couldn't figure it out. I did everything they did, what they're supposed to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to two meetings a month, whether I needed it or not, you know. Sponsored myself and said no to all AA requests, and what the hell do they want of me, you know. And I just was in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And my last drunk was not my worst drunk, but it was memorable. It was, I'd taken 2 cronies from the bar. This one guy was just covered in scars. He had fallen off of a mountain on a landscaping job, and he'd fallen down the cement culvert. And he was just a mess, you know, and he was one of my lower companions, and a buddy of his, and my oldest son, and his truck, and I had a ski boat, but I didn't have a car that was strong enough to pull the ski boat. You'd think I'd sold the boat and got a car, wouldn't you? But we hooked the car to the back of his truck, and we went up to Lake Casitas. And on the way up, we stopped at a combination bait shop liquor store, and they bought some bait and a 6-pack of half quarts between the 2 of them. I said, what are you going to do with that? They said, well, we go fishing. We don't drink. We're out here to go fishing. I said, all right. I bought a case of beer and a quart of scotch, you know. Because, you know, the anchor might get stuck, and you might be out there all night or something. I don't know. And, you know, I don't remember. The only thing I remember from that fishing trip, I remember falling off the pier onto the trailer and really hurting my back. I remember waking up on the bottom of the boat, coming to on the bottom of the boat, and both of them are sitting on my chest trying to get the keys out of my hand. And I'm saying, it's my goddamn boat, and I'll drive this goddamn boat if I want to. They drove the boat. And the next thing I know, I'm spread eagle in the back of this pickup truck, and it's pouring down rain, and we're coming down Highway 101 through Camarillo, and it's stop-and-go traffic. It's the Thanksgiving weekend. And I come to in this back of this pickup truck. They're all high and dry in the cab. And I look, and there's about this much left in the scotch bottle, and a couple cans of beer rolling around in the cab. So I'm drinking the scotch and chasing it with beer and waving at the cars. And they're all pointing and laughing. I thought it was because I was cute or something, you know. And to make a long story short, I got home, and I went across the street and got my other kids and came back, and the This guy came back the next day, the one that was all scarred and everything, and he says, Milton, you don't know this, but he said, I was in Alcoholics Anonymous for 5 years. He said, I'm now drinking, but I'm controlling it and I'm doing fine. I mean, this guy, he's a mess, right? He says, but you, you son of a bitch, he said, if you don't get your ass back to Alcoholics Anonymous, you're not going to live out the year. I thought, he's telling, for some reason or other, him telling me this, it had more import than anybody else in the world, you know. If a doctor had told me, you know, I said, oh, you're full of shit, you know. But this bum, you know, that is an absolute alcoholic, you know, the worst kind, is telling me that I'm a loser, you know. Well, I took his advice. I called my old sponsor. This is a guy that I had sponsored him, and he sponsored me, and I'd sponsored him, and he sponsored me, and I'd worked for him. I'd stolen money from him. I mean, he was just a real good friend. And Mel came down to my house, and he says, I told him, I said, Mel, I'm going to get sober. And he went, I said, no, really, Mel, this time I'm going to get sober, and I want you to be my sponsor. And he got this really pained look on his face, you know. He says, Milton, he says, I've been sober 3 years. He says, I'm the secretary of a meeting. He says, anybody that sponsors you has a tendency to look really bad, you know. And I guess I must have got a really hurt look on my face because he softened. He says, I'll tell you what I'll do. He says, I'll take your case for 90 days until we can find somebody to handle your contract or something to that effect. And he said, I want you to get on the first step, and I want you to stay there for 90 days, and that's all I want you to do. That's all I want you to do, you know. Well, I got real involved. I started a meeting out in Thousand Oaks, which is when I was like a couple of months sober, and it's still going. Not anything because I did it, but it's nice to look in the directory and see the meeting's still there. And I started going into the jails with a guy out there that was on the H&I committee, and I was secretary of 2 meetings, because in those days the enthusiasm was a little low. I was the secretary of 1 meeting because 5 people had denied it, had just declined it before me, and the other one, I think 10 people had declined it before me. And I got to do everything. I got to set up the chairs by myself, make the coffee by myself, break the meeting down by myself, the whole shot. But it kept me sober. And I got to a place where I was about 14 months sober, and I'd gotten a motorcycle, and I was racing it through Incidental Canyon. It was kind of my escape. And all my problems were right there in front of me. Nothing seemed to be better. I was 14 months sober, and I was where I was so many times before in my life. If this is as good as it gets, I'd just as soon be drunk. And for some God unknown reason, instead of going to a bar, I went to a meeting. It was a Sunday meeting at the Holiday Inn. And there was this guy speaking. It was kind of bizarre, Clancy Eye from the Sky, and I didn't know who the hell he was. And I got there late, and I was looking around the room to see if she was there. And I don't know if you know who she is, but she, in my day, was the woman that was going to make my life wonderful, take care of me and the kids, and I didn't have to do a goddamn thing. You know. I come to find out she doesn't exist, but I was looking for her, and she wasn't in the meeting, so I was looking to see if she was parking her car in the parking lot. And I heard the tail end of something he said. He said, if you have a problem with alcohol, and you drink alcohol and you get in all kinds of trouble, but you sober up and you put the plug in the jug and your life is wonderful, and you get along with everybody and everybody loves you, he says, you don't have to go to these cockamamie meetings. And I heard that, you don't have to go to these cockamamie meetings. And I thought, this guy's got maybe a mail-in program or a correspondence course, something like that, where you don't have, because I hated meetings. Just hated meetings. My favorite line in the big book was, we are people who not normally mix. And I'd look around the room when I'd come in and I'd say, you got that right. If I saw these people in a bar, I'd drink somewhere else, you know. And I had a wonderful attitude. I used to go up to old timers and tell them that they ought to read Psycho-Cybernetics and do them some good. But anyhow, I went up, I heard him say that, and I thought, this guy's got a real program for me. And then he went on to say, but if you're one of those people that the farther you get away from the last drink, the more untenable your life is, the more suicidal you become, the crazier you are, the harder you can't get along with anybody, you're fighting everything and everybody, you have a problem we call alcoholism. And what you have to do is you have to get a sponsor, and you have to buy the big book and the 12 and 12, and do what the people around here that are staying sober do. And he said, well, that will do for you, that will make your life so comfortable, and you'll feel so good within your own skin that you won't find it necessary to drink. Now I get chills when I reiterate that, because that was the first time in my life that I heard what it was all about. See, I thought you just sat in the meeting and you got it by osmosis. I mean, I thought the big book and the 12 steps were for sissies, and for men didn't have to do that. You just came in here and listened to the jargon, and you got sober and you lived happily ever after. I was really dismayed to find that there was a lot you had to do, because I had heard something as a child that I really didn't believe. And I spent 38 years trying to find a way around that. And that is, you get out of something in life what you put into it. Whether it's a hobby, a marriage, or whatever it is, if you put very little into it, you're going to get very little out of it. And I found something else that I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous that I didn't realize. If it comes easy, it has no value. If it takes work and sacrifice, it has value. And I always wanted it easy. I wanted it fast. I wanted it quick. And I didn't want to do anything to get it. And if I got something in those circumstances, it had no value. The things that I have today, like my program, my marriage, my sailboat, everything I have, both spiritually and materially, have taken work and sacrifice, and I enjoy the hell out of them. A few years ago, I was diagnosed as having Parkinson's disease, and that was a problem. It was the deep depths of despair for 30 days or so. But then the program just kicked in, and I got so much from having Parkinson's disease. I'm happier now than I was before I had it. Because I realize now that no matter what comes down the pike, with this program and with a spiritual life, you can handle it. Not only can you handle it, you can have a good life. And I always mention now that I have Parkinson's disease. Not just for the sympathy, well, maybe a little bit. But mainly, I have met some wonderful people that have come out of the audience that have Parkinson's disease and asked if they could have my number, we could talk. I've got 4 people now that I talk to on the phone that also have Parkinson's disease, and we're kind of like our own little AA support group. And it's really, really nice, And I also want you to know that no matter if you're dreading your time in the barrel when you get older, something happens to everybody, it's not a big deal. If you've got faith and you've got a spiritual life and you've got a higher power, you can survive anything, absolutely anything, on the face of the earth. And there's nowhere else in the world I can possibly think of you can get this. Nowhere in the world. And all you have to do is you read the 12 and 12 and the big book, and turn your life around 180 degrees, and not think of yourself. I sponsor guys, and I think of their problems. I think of my children's problems. I think of what I can do to be a better husband, what I can do to be a better AA member, how I can be of service to my fellow man. I rarely think of myself anymore. And that is so much comfort and so much freedom, because I used to be just listening to the K-Self all the goddamn time, And if you have a problem and you put your little magnifying mind on it, I don't care what it is, you can blow that thing into something that's so powerful and so big that you can't get out of the house, Because I've done it and I've seen people do it, The sickest people in AA are the people that are still self-involved. It says so right in the literature. The more self-involved you are, the sicker you are. The more you get out of yourself, the more you do for your fellow man, the more don't ask what you can do for what your fellow man can do for you. Ask what you can do for your fellow man. I mean, that's the 11-step prayer in a nutshell. And if you're waiting for yours, you've screwed yourself. If you're waiting for yours, you've got expectation of what yours is, and it will never, ever measure up. I have very little expectations of anybody around me, and everything I get is a gift. When I had high expectations, I got nothing. And I'm getting the same thing. The life I have today, materially, if I had it when I was drinking, would have sucked. But the fact that I'm sober, I can enjoy every bit of my life, and I can enjoy every possession I have, and I can enjoy every day I have on the face of this earth. And I learned it here in the program Alcoholics Anonymous. I came in here with a mind that was a ghetto, and now it's nice and clean and beautiful lawns and white fences, and there's a little neighborhood over in one corner that's got a guy with a spray can that runs loose every once in a while, but not very often. You've been a great crowd. Thank you.
This is another typical Saturday night meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now we'll have announcements from our Secretary, Willis.
Willis, I have alcoholism. The Secretary. The second speakers again, Loretta and Milton. And we have a special welcome to the newcomers. Could you please stand so we can get better acquainted with you? I know you're having a tough time. I have Suzanne, Kelsey, Lee, Eugene, Brian, Ann, Tom, Jay, Bruce, Gary, Chris, Mark, and David. Welcome.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.